Alright, so today what we are doing is building shelving here in my laundry room. It's like a perfect little space for shelving. What are we using? We're going to use MDF. We have some pieces of trim that we're going to use as a reveal on the shelves, and I'm also going to be using pieces of wood to use as support. It's going to be a very easy project. It's probably going to take a day to do everything, and then we'll probably paint tomorrow. So I'm going to do 5 different shelves, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to mark all of our studs. So we're going to use a stud finder. This is a stud finder. So we're going to use this and try and find the nails or the screws that they use to install the drywall, which is right there. So there's a stud right there. First thing we're doing is measuring where I want my shelves. So you can see we're using a 4-foot level and drawing out where I want my shelves to be. I am measuring them 16 inches away from each other, and I'm going to do a total of 5 shelves. Next, with our stud finder, we found where the studs were, and now we're going to mark our studs on the wall exactly where they hit where our shelves are, because this is where our support is going to go. So taking some scrap wood, I use this as the support for the bottom shelf. It's a little bit thicker than I'm going to be using the other pieces. So this is going to be the shelf that's going to be holding the most weight. So I screwed in this support piece into the studs. You can see I'm using 2-inch screws, and I'm screwing directly into the studs, securing this piece of wood. Now this is a 1x2 piece of wood. So here you can see our bottom support has been installed just using some screws and screwing directly into those studs. Next, taking some 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch pieces of wood, we're going to cut these into the correct dimension for our sides and the support for our other shelves. Putting a little bit of silicone. These are the side supports. And then we're going to install it on the side of the wall, and then we're going to use the brad nailer and install.
I need the brad nailer. Ese level.
So we put in a bottom support. This is just some scrap wood right here. We're putting some silicone before we put the shelf in. We measured where we wanted each shelf. They're 16 inches apart from each other. We measured where our studs are. We put the support on the top shelf, and then we installed the shelf. And I'm using MDF for my shelves. This is 3/4 thick. So after installing the top shelf and the bottom shelf, I wanted to point out that we left a little gap right here in the top support. That is because we're going to put the center divider in that gap and let it rest on top of our bottom shelf, as you can see we're doing right now. So this is how we're going to make it flush, and then we're going to use the brad nailer to enforce and install. So after putting in the centerpiece, now we're just putting in more strips for support for the shelves. So we put a piece this way, and then we're putting 2 small pieces on the side. And this is what the shelf sits on to give it support. Show you this side. Now that we have our middle, our top and our bottom, and our support, we're going to install our middle shelves. So we're using the silicone, we're putting it on our support pieces, and then we're installing the MDF on top using a brad nailer to install all of our rest of our shelves. After we've installed our shelves, next I'm taking this very thin piece of wood. We're going to use this as a reveal. So this is going to hide the MDF and where they're intersecting to make it look like a custom, very clean finished piece. Again, we're using the brad nailer to install this thin strip of wood.
So as you can see, it's very thin pieces of wood that I'm using to put as the reveal. And we installed it with the brad nailer. You can see how finished and clean this looks. We took the silicone and we're going to use the silicone to cover the brad nail holes and to cover all of the little creases and just make everything look very finished and clean. As you can see, Art's doing that right now. So basically just filling in all of the gaps, any imperfections, any of the holes, just making it look very, very clean. And make sure to use a silicone that is paintable, because once we're done filling in all the gaps and making it look clean and covering all the holes, we're going to go in, we're going to prime it, and we're going to paint it. So make sure you're using a silicone that can be painted. This is a paintable silicone. It's not like 100% waterproof where you can't paint over it. So just a tip, again, you want to get the paintable silicone. Once all of our holes have been filled with either putty or silicone, I'm going in with a hand sander and I'm going to sand down everything to make sure everything is nice and smooth, going over the wood trim pieces because this is where all of my putty is. I don't have to go over the MDF because the MDF is actually really, really smooth, and this is why I chose this type of material to make my shelves out of. So I'm just going over the wood pieces that have the putty or the silicone. So now going in with some Kilt primer, I am priming all of my shelves, all of the reveal with a foam roller. This leaves a very nice finish. So this MDF was just soaking it up. So I used probably a half a gallon or close to a gallon of primer. So make sure you do that. That way it doesn't soak up your paint. So as you can see, I drenched my shelves with primer. So I'm going to let this dry. As this is drying, we're going to go back in with silicone to make sure all of the gaps and everything have been covered. Once it's been painted, we're able to see the gaps a lot better. So I'm just making sure that we covered everything. I don't want there to be any gaps or imperfections. So that's why we're going back in with that silicone. And once it's dry, then we can start painting. So after letting the primer sit and dry, I'm going in with my Sherwin Williams Snowbound White, and this is going to be in semi-gloss. So I'm going to be painting my shelves and the wall just to kind of give it a fresh coat of paint, and making sure I give it a good 2 coats. That way everything is completely covered because that MDF was still soaking up a lot of my paint. So after those 2 coats of Snowbound White, this is the finished product. I am in love with how this turned out. It only took a day and a half to complete. It was very, very simple, not that expensive. I cannot wait to start styling these shelves. So please, if you have any comments, have any questions, please leave it in the comment box. I will answer all questions as best as I can. And I will see you guys in my next video. Take care.